Morning people, welcome back to F Politics. In today's episode of the UK is being dog-walked into fascism by our politicians and the media is helping them do it, we have LBC's Tom Swarbrick. As you know, at last week's Prime Minister's questions, Kemi, Badenoch and Keir Starmer were fighting with each other as to who is responsible for the courts allowing Palestinian refugees to stay in the UK via the Ukrainian Refugee scheme.
The Ukraine family scheme. A family of 6 from Gaza have applied to live in Britain using this scheme, and a judge has now ruled in their favour. This is not what the scheme was designed to do.
I do not agree with the decision. She's right. It's the wrong decision.
And that's disgusting for a number of reasons. For starters, the fact that the UK is one of the governments who sold the weapons that were used to destroy those Palestinians' homes in the first place. The fact that the basis of that entire argument is that it's okay to look after Ukrainian refugees, but not Palestinian refugees, as if somehow Ukrainian lives matter more than Palestinian ones. I can't for the life of me think of why they might believe that. It's even more disturbing when you think about the fact that both of the leaders of our two parties in our two-party system are clearly on the wrong side of history. But on top of that, the Prime Minister was explicitly calling a decision of the UK courts wrong. Prime Ministers aren't supposed to do that. One of the fundamental principles of democracy is this thing called the separation of powers. You have your lawmaking body, so the Parliament, you have the executive, so the government, and then you have the courts, the judiciary. The executive sets the direction of Parliament, the Parliament makes the laws, and then the courts enforce those laws. We keep those powers separate for a number of reasons. For starters, the old phrase that power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely, so it makes sense to make sure that those powers are split between different bodies, but especially because of the thing called the rule of law, which says the law should apply equally to everybody. Because once you start letting politicians decide when the law should and should not apply, especially if it relates to them, you get into very dictatorial territory. Which is why the judge in the case, Chief Justice Carrs, hit back saying she was deeply troubled by the Prime Minister and Kemi Badenoch's remarks, saying that both of them were inappropriate. And yet LBC's Tom Swarbrick is making this point.
Oh my God, is this judge actually for real? But it is even wrong, according to Lady Sukar, for the elected Prime Minister to say in public that he thinks a judge has got a decision wrong.
Because it's not for politicians to say when they think judges have got things wrong. If they don't like a decision of a judge, then they can appeal through the courts, or they can change the goddamn laws because that's their job. Once you have politicians saying who they think is guilty or innocent, who they think deserves to have rights and be protected as a refugee, and who doesn't, the whole system breaks down. It is literally textbook fascism to undermine the legitimacy of public institutions such as the courts. But carry on, Tom.
Who is actually in charge here? Who gave the judiciary oversight of Britain's immigration decisions? When did that happen?
That's their job. They're literally the judges. Like, he keeps calling them lawyers in this clip because he wants to devalue what they actually are, but it is literally their job to make decisions about how the law applies to immigration. So if you're asking who gave them oversight over the UK's immigration decisions, it's literally the Constitution. But here's the bit where he actually shows that he understands the issues involved, but still chooses the wrong side.
And here we come, ladies and gentlemen, to a fundamental tension that is set to blow up. It's already had the fuse lit on it, but this is going to be one of the defining issues of the next few years. And the tension is this. If the lawyers say...
You mean judges, but carry on.
Look, we are bound by the statute book to make decisions under laws like the right to family life that might fly in the face of what politicians have decided. And the politicians say, well, the lawyers are wrong to make decisions, or the judges are wrong to make decisions based on the interpretation of the laws that exist on our statute book because we don't like the decision, then I think we are rapidly heading to the point where a decision has to be made on some of these laws, and specifically human rights laws. If the chief judge is ticking off the Prime Minister for saying that they've got it wrong because those lawyers have actually got no other option but to acquiesce to the ECHR laws against the wishes of the elected politicians, then I think that these politicians are duty-bound to scrap some of those laws.
So he understands that the judges have no choice but to follow and apply the laws that have been passed by Parliament, which is what fucking happened. And that includes the fact that the Human Rights Act, which comes from the European Convention on Human Rights, is part of British law. So Tom is not only saying that it's right for the Prime Minister to undermine the decisions of judges, giving him effective influence over all three branches of government, making him more like a king than a politician, but he's also saying that it's time the politicians start to scrap international human rights law so that we can, well, in this case, start to discriminate against brown refugees. The whole purpose of having international human rights law is to set standards across the globe that protect people from evil governments. Which is why the first big international human rights treaty was the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. Can you think of anything that might have happened in the late 30s, early 40s that might have made European governments think, maybe we should have rules about what governments are allowed to do to people? And the European Convention on Human Rights, which the Human Rights Act is based on, the issue we're dealing with in this case, that was signed in 1950. And remember, the reason why the media is often referred to as the fourth estate is because you have the three branches of government: the parliament, the executive, and the judiciary. It's already bad enough in the UK that a party that has a minority of the vote always gets majority control in Parliament, and they get to decide who becomes Prime Minister, so the Prime Minister has control over the Parliament already. Now we're talking about letting the Prime Minister pass judgment against the decisions of the courts, and elements of the media, the fourth estate, are backing that up. I'll be discussing the big threats to our democracy in my big Labour video coming soon, but oh my god, we are not in good shape. I'm Kemi. Make sure you follow F Politics so politics doesn't F you. Have a great week.